Hello and welcome to the 66th Think Tank. This week our subject is truly magical cities, cities built on the magic of convenience that we've been working on for the last couple of weeks, and how it can affect things at the very base level to get away from just simple medieval style cities in RPGs. First we're going to hand over to Mark to do this week's check-ins.
Hello, right, so yeah, going to go through check-in and see how everybody's weeks went. I'm going to open proceedings myself. Very busy week at work, but we're finally getting to the end of the end of this busy period. Next week I'm out in Italy delivering some machinery to a customer, and then the week after that delivering the other one, and then that's two of my 4 projects off the list. And I can focus on the long ones, so that's slowly coming together bit by bit. Yeah, so that's my week. Very tired. Worked all last weekend. Working some of this weekend as well. It's great. Chris, how about you? How's your week been?
Guess what I did this week? I shipped the Kickstarter. All God knows how many hundreds of books have left the building.
Wow.
Metaphorically, because they're not actually here, but you know, they have gone, they're shipped. If you backed the Kickstarter, if you took advantage of our catch-up offers, those books have shipped, so they will get to you in a few days or possibly a few weeks depending where you live, but they are out the door. So barring 1 or 2 bits of tidying up, the Kickstarter is done.
Cool, excellent. Well, now that's done, we can start doing the next one then.
Yeah.
Because there's no rest. So, Pat, how about you?
I got the final arts on the first page of my comic, which was pretty damn awesome. I've started writing some more stuff, building more of a narrative around that, and been writing more 66. We had a talk about the stress mechanic in 66 after last week's playtest as well, and I've been thinking about how monsters interact with stress a bit more, which has been the main kind of thinking focus of my week. So that's basically it.
Cool. I think we're playtesting a bit more of that tonight. I think after the session.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Cool. I'll hope you can stick around for doing some more of that. Josh, how about you?
I've been ill. Ill this week. In fact, I even had yesterday off work. I was so ill. But otherwise, not too bad. I've been helping Alex with his idea for the shipbuilding system, which is a great concept so far. I'm really liking it. And I've had a shave. Unfortunately, this has revealed my massive chin.
Okay. Glad to hear about the spaceship mechanic. I'd love to hear about a bit more about that in the future. Peculiar to hear about the massive chin. Alex, how does your chin compare to Josh's and your week?
Much fuzzier, as you can see. So my week, more work in that sort. Finally got a paycheck out of it, so that's a good thing. Like Josh was saying, working on the shipbuilding system for 66 Galaxy, filling in descriptions on hull types and stuff like that. Progress is being made.
Cool. Well, I'd like to sort of hear more about that mechanics. It'd be interesting to see how you've done that versus the way James and I had looked at it when we did the Galaxies, or sorry, the Starlight one we've been looking at. So I think that's all of us done. So that's our weeks. So we can look at focusing on the next week. So I need to pass back over to Chris to go talk about Magic Cities, what we've got on the line, and what thoughts we have of our own.
Thank you, Mark. Yes, truly magical cities is the subject for this week. What we're sort of trying to get at is cities which aren't just medieval cities with a little bit of magic layered on top. You know, asking the question, if you really had a magical world, how would cities develop differently? What would they end up looking like? What sort of things can we come up with? And so, as normal, we put these ideas out on, or this question out on Reddit and G+, and on Facebook, and we got some great responses, lots of great ideas. Now, so we're going to sort of pick a few of those ideas up, talk about them, throw in a few ideas of our own. So let's start. So truly magical cities. Alex, I believe I think I think you've sort of let's start at the silly end, possibly, of a truly magical city.
Yeah, so the silly end at the end of the posts from Nasso Little kind of wandered off into a city being like Willy Wonka's chocolate factory converted into a city with modular home-based infrastructure for leopard gnomes. I think this is possibly what happens if you let the Nutrimancers run wild and have their own place. So, chocolate fountain highways, little candy cane toll booths, speed limits in the form of nautical speeds, so knots or noughts, little adorable green men with doll-sized police uniforms made out of blue taffy that drive around wheeled cupcakes with a cherry lighting up for the sirens. And then it then devolved further into some kind of Batman thing with, this is my city, Wonkaville, and I've lived here all my life. Times are tough now with the gumdrop factory shutting down. It's just cheaper to export business to Pockyville. Crime's low for now, but if I have to put the suit on again, I will. I am Candyman.
Yes, I think with ideas like that, the normal way you sort of present them to a player or to players is you have them as outsiders coming from the normal world, even if adventurers or whatever else, and they end up in this weird, bizarre location, and they discover it, and that's how they get enjoyment out of the city, by discovering all these sort of stupid things the GM has put in. Though it would be interesting to do a campaign entirely set in that city, and actually have the players come up as basics. So, Josh, you had some thoughts on this?
It reminds me of what essentially would become like a candy plane. So just a gigantic plane of a city, just entirely made of Candy City, which then leads to the horrifying thought: do candy elementals exist?
Oh, I like the idea of candy elementals. We do have shit elementals in the system, so sort of like the other end of the scale, really. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Alex, some thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it does evolve from just one man mage, just his one obsession. He just decides he's going to build out of this.
Yes, but if you've got that sort of super powerful mage who's got the power to destroy the world, and he sort of, rather than sort of going the traditional route of destroying the world and being killed by adventurers in his attempt to destroy the world, he just goes, fuck it, I'm going to build a chocolate city. Why not? If you're the most powerful mage in the world.
Passport.
Yes. And Pat.
Yeah, I was just thinking, are all the inhabitants these little fuzzy creatures that you're talking about with these essentially Oompa Loompas? Because the guy who goes, "Oh, I'm Candyman," is that is that a little fella with a Candyman outfit, or is it like a proper buff, like billionaire Matt, a human man who dresses up as a candy at night? Are the inhabitants all these kind of little things, or are there like normal people there walking around who kind of every once in a while think it's a bit strange?
If you run it as the one mage decided to build it just for his own personal amusement, he becomes a vigilante just to keep it running in the way he wants it.
It could be, though. I do like the idea of an Oompa Loompa Batman. It's sort of, but there's sort of a cross between Willy Wonka and Gotham, and it would be we could infringe 2 copyrights for the price of 1. It would be fantastic. Okay, so that's silliness to start off with. Josh, you've got a slightly darker thing, I believe, to talk about.
I'm on the opposite side of the scale. While yours is more Roald Dahl, mine's more George Orwell. The dungeon punk setting. That's a phrase I've never heard before, and I fell in love with it as soon as I saw it. The way it's described by, I'll find his name, James Desborough. A dungeon punk metroplex lit by ever-burning torches, illusionary billboards, and monitored by crystal balls in place of CCTV. A vast bureaucracy of mages is kept in indentured servitude, and guild money runs everything from behind a figurehead monarch. I love that. It's, instead of going up, we're going down. We're going all the way down. So it sounds like a city that the players could encounter, get themselves stuck in some kind of political intrigue, which then goes all the way through the centre and further up, metaphorically, the chain of command.
All right, so the powers that be, you know, the more prestige is the lower you are down in the city, further away from the surface.
Yeah, the closer you're to the surface is how more rich you are, because you occasionally get to see light.
Oh, right.
It mightn't even necessarily be covered. It might have an open patch, but the way it's built and built on top of each other means that no light gets to the bottom bits.
Oh, right, so it is literal repression. You know, if you are at the bottom of the pile, you really are at the bottom. I mean, that's sort of interesting. Someone threw in on the Reddit, because Reddit did throw in a lot of ideas about social and economic consequences of what would happen in, you know, post-scarcity and social factors which would kick in when you have magic. And I always quite like this, and I think it's an important thing to think about, because it gives you ideas about how a city could evolve and look completely different from our own. But Tofu Slicer, I think, mentioned a caste system, that you get this real split between people who can do magic and people who can't, or possibly people who can do certain types of magic are higher than other types of magic, which is higher than, you know, non-magical types. And that sort of fits in quite well with that dungeon punk, that's the dark and gloomy, that the non-magical people get shunted right down to the bottom of the pile. Alex, your thoughts on this?
I was just thinking maybe do it the other way around. I mean, you could easily do it as a dwarf society, and it's the lower castes are actually towards the surface, where they're uncomfortable, they're near the light, and they're not quite surrounded by the earth. And the more important you are, the further down you are, where you can mine out more space. You can actually have big areas because you're not impacting the land above.
Yes, I think, you know, whichever way you do it around, I think you can play with the metaphor of, you know, being the top of the pile and the bottom of the pile is being quite an interesting one for the social status of the city. So that's very nice. Pat, what was your thoughts on a city?
I heard the dungeon thought punk thing, but somewhere in my brain there was still the idea of the candy city, and I just like the idea of combining the two. Because when you're players, you go in, oh, it's a city made of candy. Hello, you know, we're the candy police, we're the candy guards, and then you go in and it's like, yeah, those people, they're living below the peanut butter level. They're you know, they don't get our marshmallow swirls. They have to make do with saltwater taffy.
So social status by the type of sweets and food your buildings are made out of. You know, a nicer, you know,
like Windsinger almost.
So the sort of higher middle classes would have houses made out of organic chocolate with 30% cocoa solids.
Yeah.
Down at the bottom, you that cheap chocolate bar you buy for 5p in the swimming baths. You know, that's the
chocolate.
Alex, I think you've got a thought on this.
Yeah, just the amount of candy being thrown around. We need some more magic of convenience and have some kind of insulin mage.
Yes, and dentist mage. So if you sort of had, you know, if you follow this logically through, insulin, obesity, dentistry, you know, all of these suddenly are going to be really important. Josh?
I was just about to suggest the toothpaste a wizard. He, as you say, he's going to be a very, very, very rich man.
Yes. I mean, to follow it through the sort of Willy Wonka thing, you have a sort of like a river of toothpaste. You know, sort of rather than sort of like having you know, public works which pump water to your house, you have to have the toothpaste pumped to your house and things like that. So so yeah, we can get very silly and quite dark, and as I like about truly magical things is that you can really do some interesting social commentary through how you structure your city and the silly things you do with it. So let's take it on to something slightly different direction. I think, Mark, you have some thoughts that's going to literally take us in a different direction.
Yeah, so I was having a look, just having a think about this. Now, one of the magics, a major part of magic, is teleportation or gates linking places together. So the idea I had was where it's not so much a city as a collection of the teleportation gates of cross-dimensional gates that link all other places together. So it's less a city, more of a collection of citizens who live in all cities and this one city at all times. So they're very wealthy. All goods can be brought in from wherever they're cheap. All food can be brought in from wherever it's cheapest at the time. All exports go to wherever the best prices can be had at the time. And it's kind of the sort of like, if you're thinking about social commentary, I suppose you use it like a kind of a globalization sort of allegory or something like that. But the ability to connect all places to one place has created essentially just one massive city, which can contain all things. So everything goes back and forth. Labour flows in and out depending on where they can get people in cheaply, where the money's needed. So it's not quite a city in a particular sense. There's sort of a hub, which is where you can go to get between points, or at least where the power source is for running all this magic. But a lot of the time, when you walk from one building to another, you've walked from Hong Kong to the capital of Mars in the future. When you walk to somewhere else, you've walked into ancient Constantinople, and it's just all places all brought together.
Yeah, so time and dimensional spanning things, and yeah, it's a conceptual city. That are you thinking that everybody knows they live in this conceptual city, or are you thinking there's some people in the know and the majority of people aren't?
I think it's one of the things where you know when you have the magical ability to get into it and live in it, and then you know, and then you live in that part of that community. So you get this kind of elite really is created in the story of depth, the people who can do this magic, who can operate the gates. Everybody else doesn't really know per se.
So you get that sort of beyond the veil vampire sort of things. Those people who are sort of aware of the real world, and sort of two different casts. And the interesting idea if you sort of span it, because you can make it a setting. You can, it doesn't matter what setting you're coming from. 66 modern or Lovecraft or 66 magic or whatever else. If they discover the way to move into the cities, and then they can go to any other city in space and time, which gives the GM a very broad, sheet, doesn't it, to work with?
Yeah. You can limit it a bit by saying that it's run by a council who decide how many of the... So there's only, say, a finite number of gates they can have open at any one time. So they have to pick and choose what places they need to have running at any one time. So various interests who want to try and make money out of a particular thing, I think, well, okay, well, steel was cheap in Victorian London, so we want to open a new sector of the city, which is that bit there, so that we can manufacture steel then, and then sell it to the Mars colonies or something like that. Is that kind of thing. So the city is constantly shifting as new parts of it are kind of closed off or opened up.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you made that sort of a limited resource that, this hub, mainly had 9 sections, can only be linked to 9 cities at any given time. And then you've got this nice, interesting jeopardy for characters that they don't want to go to Victorian London when that section's about to be shut off and they won't be able to get back. So it gives you an interesting plot device. So let's say hello to Jay, who's managed to join us back from sunny Spain, I believe.
Yep, back from sunny Spain. So I left Spain at 11:30 and via bus, Ryanair, and a taxi. I am here. All hail me. I have no cheesecake. So in the immediate thing, the quick thing I think of, in terms of what we're saying about having lots and lots of a city that essentially closes off and shuts and opens depending on how much needed. Start asking the question, well, when do they stop using part of the city? So, for example, if they stop using their iron forgery,
could you turn your microphone off filling with your headset, please?
There we go. The interesting idea of perhaps whether or not when these cities are sectioned off, do they vanish out of existence or do they actually stay there? Are you going to have this city with vast areas essentially unexplored or uninhabited, or just available for nasty things or interesting people to be in?
I think it's more that if they open up a sector or particular parts in a particular city, it just that kind of appears on the map. And when the people are walking around within this cityscape, this notional cityscape, it feels like they're in one place. And the same way that you'd walk around Nottingham or somewhere, you'd still be able to walk from one building to another. But one's in one place in time, another's in another place in time. As far as you're concerned, you just walk the distance. So it's not as if whole sectors appear and disappear or there's voids. Just that a new building appears, the map gets redrawn. and it kind of opens up more options.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the subject of the map, because that actually could sort of be what the council or whatever controls, and actually become a nice, interesting plot point for the game, and sort of like who controls the map, or being able to look at the map and seeing what appears and what disappears. So that would be interesting. Pat, you have some thoughts along these lines?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I did lose a bit of track there because there was some stuff going on. But basically, I was thinking, first of all, does this place have like a hub, or is it just made of other cities? Is there somewhere which is predominantly teleportaria, let's call it? And
yeah, but that's open to discussion. I kind of prefer the idea where it feels like there is a hub that you have to walk through a gate to get from the Victorian London section to the hub, then walk through a gate to get to the Mars colonies. Whereas you literally just walk straight through. So it feels like you're in a city. It feels like you're in a normal looking geography, but different bits of it are in different times.
Because my question was, how do you defend a city like that? I mean, I know you've got this thing that you can close the gates, but if you had it running on a more permanent basis, if you decided, well, in order for it to work, it has to have thingies open all the time, you can't send your troops into Victorian London because people will go, hang on, what are all these guys with laser guns doing here, or vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, the question is, like, who are you defending it against? This also springs to mind, because is there sort of another magical society trying to seize control of the city, or is there another magical city along the same lines, and the two rivals?
I quite like the idea of two magical cities fighting over which bits of the world get to be part of their city.
I think that's how it would work, because the city isn't in a place for it to be attacked. It is all of those places at once. So if Victorian London gets invaded, it's in the interest of the city to shut off those gates to protect the rest of it. Otherwise, an invading army could storm into the Turks stormed into Constantinople in 1453, could then stumble into Victorian London just by walking through the gate. So as bits of it get invaded in the rest of the world, they have to kind of shut bits of themselves off. But the way that two societies like this would attack each other is trying to interfere with the gates.
Yeah, if you opened up one of the gates to Hiroshima in 1945, that could be quite an effective attack.
Yeah. They're trying to redirect each other's gates about the place to either make the city simply not exist by breaking up all the connections, therefore there is no city.
So, just on some along these lines, a couple of ideas we got from Reddit, I think it was. So I've lost it. iGunk. I love the names on Reddit. Where else would you get someone called iGunk? He suggested TARDIS-like buildings, buildings which are bigger on the inside than they are on the outside, which I quite like, because that's a magical thing. You can have a physical geography, like a fairly traditional city, but inside you have these, small hovels. You step into these massive cavernous palaces and things like that. And I quite like that idea, because that's fun there. And Wang of Genus, along the similar lines, was talking about impossible buildings. So things, spires which, it would be impossible to build, and, just ridiculous architecture, which I always think is the sort of like the signature mark of a high fantasy city. Is like, think of Minas Tirith in Middle Earth. No one would build a city like that in reality. Just far too much work. But in a magical world, you can do that sort of thing. And finally, I must mention Mr. Incorporeal, also of Reddit, who had one stipulation for a truly magical city, and that is it has to be floating. And I quite like that idea. That's another classic fantasy, high fantasy trope, isn't it? Floating cities, islands in the sky. And I think that idea is in Gulliver's Travels, I think, as well. So it's quite an old one. So we have. So there's some ideas from Reddit and things. Right, who's got some other things either from Reddit or ideas of their own to throw in?
You've got me. I've still got my.
Oh, Pat, yes.
Yeah, I was looking at. I don't remember the name now. Just give me a second. Sorry, whoever's name it is. This is it, Jeffrey Turner. Now, he wasn't saying his own idea, he was actually recounting something else, which he said a Nomish village where the buildings were constantly being moved or moving on their own. Now, I was going to bring that into what Chris was already saying about floating buildings, but I love the idea of a city where things aren't always in the same place at the same time. Now, what I really like about that is finding your way around. Obviously, would be a hassle, but that people who live in places, people get used to things. You know, that's how people work. That's how we work as a species. So you might have, rather than say proper maps or proper directions, you actually have like times. Like you go, oh well, where's the library? Oh, the library is at 12:30. So you go, oh right, so that means it's this way. Or you know, you have the compass direction. So it's Widdershins 35. Right, that's where to go now, or that's where to go at that time to find the library.
Yeah, there's sort of like one of those ideas which actually is lovely. If you're writing a book, it sort of works. It's like Harry Potter and Hogwarts and the moving staircases and things like that. But actually, in terms of a game, either you give the players have to learn how to understand all of this, which can get bloody irritating, to be honest, so everyone sort of get their head into it, or they just ignore it and say, okay, we go to the library or whatever. So game-wise, those sorts of things can be quite tricky to do, but pure fiction-wise, they're lovely. Alex, you some thoughts about clocks?
Just something that you've got the city, everything's moving around in actually a predictable pattern. Is it moving for a purpose? Is the city one giant machine for doing something?
Oh, right, yes. So, yeah, it's not just a random movement. There is a mechanism. It's microbes living on the face of a clock. How would, what would it look like to them? So, yeah, I like that idea. I like that the city has a function and people living on it are just accidentally there and they're maybe trying to understand it. So, yeah, that was a good one. And then you've got the clockmaker. You can get very metaphorical there, can't you?
I was going very Bruston now. But I actually like the idea just because it's like if you buy a house at a massive market value, its market value might decline overnight as it moves into a rough neighbourhood.
God, the Daily Mail would hate that.
Well, I hate the Daily Mail, so I'm happy with that.
Okay, Josh, talk to me about hippies.
That's literally the quickest way I could come up with a ping for it. So, going on something we discussed last week about grow, about a whole society using the grow magic to literally shape the trees. Very much the classical tree city. But in this terms, they use the magic convenience grow to literally shape the plants around them.
Oh, yes. So, Lothlorien, isn't it, in Lord of the Rings, sort of everyone lives in trees. So, yeah, I mean, I did think about one of the things for 66 Magic about possibly having an elf culture where they grow mile-high trees and they just, one tree becomes a city. And so what actually... And then, of course, cities rise and fall. Eventually, the tree will fall down. So occasionally, adventurers find this mile-long remains of a tree rather than a city ruins. So yeah, you could definitely play with the idea of a horticulture-based, natural-based city rather than a mechanic, rather than constructed city. Pat?
Yeah, it was a bit silly when it came to my head. Like, if you've got these magicians and they're building their city out of trees and things like that, you could grow traffic. You could grow trees as traffic lights. You grow a tree, you keep it in a little batch of sped up time, so that when it turns autumnal, then you can start your engines. When the leaves fall off, you can go. To green, you have to stop. Or
yeah, maybe not traffic lights, but you could have it sort of like opening times for a shop. It's like if the leaves are out and it's all green, the shop is open, and then there's sort of at night they sort of turns to autumn and all the leaves drop off. So yeah, those sort of little details I think really make a city when you follow through the ideas and and see what actually would happen and what you can do with it. I think really make a good society. Okay, so Alex, you have some thoughts, a different type of city in mind.
Not necessarily a whole city, but just sort of thinking of the core sort of civil service thing with the bureaucramancer we were discussing previously. Just thinking that magic of convenience really grows out of necessity. So it's, I have to keep doing this the long way around. I will do this to make it shorter. So for the bureaucramancer stuff to evolve, it was going to have to have been dealing with a lot of bureaucracy and red tape and paperwork. So just sort of thinking of some palace or castle, which is the civil service. And because they're in a city where mages all need licenses or permits, you need a license to be a food mage because you affect the economy this way, or you need a license to be this kind of mage. So you've got licenses and paperwork and permits and registrations of births and graduations and deaths and undeaths and bloodlines. So you've got all this paperwork, so you've actually then got your bureaucrancers evolve out of that.
Yeah. I like that sort of logical thing, is that the way you control majors and things like that is they have to be licensed, and that means paperwork. Maybe you have to pass a test before you can do each spell and everything. And you could take it slightly silly, like you have to register your destiny. You just can't turn up with a birthmark in the shape of a crown. You have to be properly licensed as a person with destiny. And
there's also things part of that. If you've got all these licenses, you then need people to check on these licenses. So you then get almost the magical sort of ATF, Department of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms type thing, to check up on these licenses, make sure these things are all sorted. Which means you can then have a campaign, you can have the players being part of this ATF. Your investigation goes awry, unlicensed rogue mage turns up doing all sorts of things, you have to try and stop it.
Yeah, we're sort of almost edging into sort of like paranoia, the game Paranoia, not mental health state. It's sort of like, you have the bureaucracy rather than the computer, and it's telling you what you have to do and things like that. That sort of like, and sort of feeds back on what we talked about, sort of dungeon punk and kind of dark version of a magical city. Okay, so let's change the tone a little bit. Jay, I think you've got an idea.
Yeah, just rattling around in my head, coming out of what Pat was saying about a city that reorganizes itself, and Mark was saying about a city that literally just is a map room and a hub, and then how it works comes off there. The idea of a city that's almost entirely nomadic, because if you've got the magical ability to create pretty much anything you want quite easily and quickly without having to necessarily worry about gathering of resources, why does a city need to be in one place? Because cities drive out of the people needing to be together to do something, but the location is determined by access to resources. If your access to resources is not limited by location, so you can use magic to mine instantly or have crops grow to harvest overnight, I could easily imagine that a city, the case where literally it's just a nomadic people, so it's a caravan or of enough caravans and wagons for a city of, like, say, 50,000 people, and it just moves to the resources. So if it decide they're running out of food, so they just doodle over to a bit of pasture and just grow food overnight. They decide they need a bit more resources, so they just wander over to the mountains and just grow a load. Now, if you had a lot of societies in your world all did that, then you'll get interesting movements of how they conflict and how they don't, how some of them stay in more places. If it's just one city that's doing that amongst a world of more stabilized cities, then this city almost acts like a plague of locusts. It turns up, bounces up against your culture quite severely because it's got an entirely different mentality on the idea of what is and what isn't territory, or it has no concept of territory, and then it moves on again. So that could be quite interesting.
Yeah, those two routes you can take. You can look at it as like a model on sort of nomadic tribes, in that if you have multiple nomadic tribes in an area, they have to sort of cooperate to a certain extent so that they don't both try to go for the same resource at the same time, or if they do, they end up fighting. Or the other side is, you have static cities, static civilizations, and the nomadic one bumps into it like a horde of locusts. And you end up with two very different worlds just on that sort of simple thing. Is everyone nomadic, or is only one party nomadic? And that's a good one. And of course, the question is, how do they move around? They don't have to be wheeled vehicles or things like that. The buildings could literally get up and walk to the new destination. Spout legs. Absolutely no reason why not in a magical society.
Yeah, I mean, you could with just Josh just to point out, you could have something that was floating along. But depends what shape you would. If you had Pangea or a planet or a world that was very much on the land base, then walking or a gentle float. I can imagine actually the cities just gently float, and you have to tow them.
So
it's a
everyone gets
caravan
out and pulls.
Yeah, it's a caravan of floating buildings. Or I quite like the idea, if you do flip it around, do a world that it's lots of small archipelagos, lots and lots of small archipelagos, so thousands upon thousands of islands and island chains. Then these are literally just the floating cities, so it's boats.
Yeah, you just collection of boats. You get different boats moving around. That'd be a good one. And also, the thing about if you're not fixed like that, you can get real schisms in society. And if you're pissed off with your neighbour, you just bugger off and go and join another nomadic group. So there's lots of sort of things we can do on that. Yeah, I think we're probably coming up on time for ideas. So anyone sort of any last ideas on cities or anything we've got? Alex, I think you have.
I just think with the nomadic cities, if you always have different collections of things to be the cities work on a different magic. So you have one that floats, you have one that walks, you have one that drives, you have one you have to pull.
Yes, so yeah, that you could define the cities and almost like the personalities of the people, the residents of their cities, by how that particular city moves. So the people who have to pull it, by ropes, have to walk along. They're big and strong and stout, whereas those ones who just drift along like a cloud are all lazy and defeat. So yeah, you can do some sort of stereotyping with that. Yeah. So, any other last thoughts on this? Nope. Okay, I must give a shout out to a couple of people. Jürgen on G+, who sort of gave us some great links to some stuff he had written already for one of his campaigns. We didn't mention Halifax, who had a really nice description of a city of bones, a very sort of it sort of appears, a sort of empty city which just appears and people wander into it and never find anything useful in there, but it's dark and ominous. So a couple of other things like that I really liked out there. So thank you very much. Oh, Josh, quickly.
What if the city itself is feeding off the dead remains of the people who wander into it?
Ooh, yes.
Like some kind of gigantic compost bin.
Or Venus flytrap. So yeah, it looks like a lovely city. You come in and slowly get drawn towards the heart of the city and then get munched. Yeah, the city has a living entity feeding off its inhabitants. That's just a whole nother way you can take it. So that's it for Truly Magical Cities. There's some great ideas we've got there. Thank you everyone on G+ and on Reddit for your ideas. We very much appreciate them. So, people, have you any thoughts about what we should do next week? And lots of silence.
We could flesh around more on the magical city kind of concept. We could go for high-tech cities as kind of an alternative. The problem is if you get sufficiently high-tech, then it just looks like a magical city, really. But we could do something along those lines, give something different, what cities exist out in the galaxy, so it'd be useful for the galaxy type stuff or for other generic modern kind of material.
Yeah, I mean, technology, we haven't really looked at the technology for 66 Galaxy or, just generally sort of high-tech technology. That would certainly be a way to go. I'm sort of a bit loath to just do high-tech cities. I think we need a slightly different angle than that. Yeah, or as one of the possible things we could, Alex, is pick up one of those magical cities and develop ideas for it. Interesting. I quite like the idea of going high-tech, but I don't want to do just the same thing but high tech. So can we think of an angle, something we want to talk about in terms of cities and technology. That's a resounding no. Alex, you have a thought.
Yeah, so why not build it off of the sort of nomadic world sort of thing? If you put it out and think of different ways these nomad cities could work, different ways these nomad cities could move around. But posit the question too: how does a nomadic city move? And sort of develop ideas and, yeah, as Josh said, adventure hooks and stuff to do around that particular idea.
Yes, that certainly would do. So yeah, we have a. What you're thinking of, either the world sort of moves through space in this sort of like high-tech setting, or a world where everybody's nomadic on the world.
So if everyone nomadic on the world. So I think what Jay was talking about just before with the magic cities, that you've got these nomadic cities and how they, if you want to do a thing of pick a selection of cities which have different ways they move, and then we can do stuff in those.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think how I would phrase that for the question. Put it out on Reddit and stuff. Okay, I think maybe we'll sort of take this offline, because I don't think we've got an amazingly strong idea either direction. So we'll sort of knock that around, and I'll make sure we have something for next week. So that's it for Cities of Truly Magical Cities. I'm going to hand it over to who's it? Whose turn is it? Whose turn is it? It is Josh. Josh, you have pluses and deltas to do.
Chris, you completely forgot about me. So, speaking of which, I will start with you, Chris.
Bastard. Right, so pluses and deltas. Plus, we had a shed load of ideas. I mean, there were these sort of, just so many ideas to talk about. And that's sort of, I'm actually going to take that as my delta as well, actually, that we just had so many ideas, and all of them I'd like to develop and follow through on. So, yeah, brilliant ideas and too many ideas.
Fantastic. Pat, good to see you back. How are you feeling?
Better. I was feeling very squiffy there towards the end, but I'm all right now. So that's my delta. Is I had a horrible cold and a horrible stomachache, and I still have a horrible cold, but at least now I don't have a stomachache.
Fantastic. Nice and short. Jay, you don't really look that tanned.
No, because I spent pretty much the entire time at a conference centre. So my positive is going to be that I've been in Spain the last week, and we came up with a lot of good ideas. And my delta is going to be that while I was in Spain, I was mostly in the conference centre. So that's probably it. But in terms of the meeting, yeah, I think, again, it's the glut of ideas again, thinking about ways we can actually start using them. So I would lean towards picking an idea and then getting stuck in and seeing what we could get out of it.
Fantastic. What about you, Mark? How do you feel today?
Pluses. I like the idea of going through and getting developing some more settings material and places where you can set adventures. And I like the ideas that we've had. There's plenty we can do with it. Deltas. What do you want, Bomb? It's nice to dig out stuff on Reddit, but I noticed in a few of these we tend to over-rely on what's on Reddit and kind of discuss a lot of other people's ideas rather than kind of having a lot of our own to discuss. I mean, it might well be the lack of time, really. So we've only got, half an hour, 40 minutes realistically to discuss all that stuff. But it might be worth picking what we kind of consider to be the very best few from Reddit, and then talk about our own ideas in amongst them, and then kind of give like a list of honourable mentions for those that we liked, but didn't really have a lot of time to discuss. Because I'm kind of picking a lot of the people ideas, reading them out, talking about it a bit, and then not doing much with it. And also not really kind of generating our own.
Certainly something to consider for the future. Alex?
Yeah, so it was nice to get the ideas from Reddit, and it's nice to sort of have a bunch of there. But again, I think we do need to improve the structure of pick one or two from Reddit, and then say these are the two we're working on, and then honorable mentions. These is what we did, and also maybe try and figure out what we're doing next week ahead of time.
I think we did that last week. So something definitely to consider for next meeting. As for myself, pluses, I always love discussing new locations. It's always good. One of the things that gets me going. Absolutely love it. Deltas, this frigging cold's still here. And I know I seem to be copying several people in this thread, but you know what? Colds suck. So, with that, I will pass you on to Alex for our sign-off.
Okay, so that was our think tank there for the cities based on magic convenience. We are going to work on figuring out what we're going to do next week, and you will be seeing an update on Facebook, G+, and Reddit as towards that. So that's it from us now, and you can tune in next week, next Friday at 7 p.m. British Standard Time. We will wave goodbye to you all now.